Welcome everybody. I am thrilled. This is we had about 250 people register for this webinar, and it brings me back to the spring of last year when we had the opportunity to give all those amazing webinars for free to the whole state. I loved that, and it feels like that again. So hello. And the reason that we are able to do this is, of course, the Department of Ed funds, or we have a contract with the Department of Ed to provide some services, one of which is we support the schools that for various reasons are working on improvement. And we decided, so we've created these webinars for those schools, but then we decided since we are virtual, we can open it up to the state, which feels great. All right, today we have some very simple goals, but a very dense presentation. So here we go. And part of the reason I've intentionally made the presentation dense is because these resources are yours to have afterwards, and you can have at them as you have time afterwards. Okay, so our goals today are to completely understand, or almost completely understand, what student agency is and why it's essential for our diverse learners. And then as we're going through the presentation, think about what you feel ready to do in your classroom and pick a couple things that you're ready to try. So those are the goals. So first, we're going to talk about what we mean by student agency and why it's important. Those are our first two goals. And what I'd love for you to do now is, when you think of student agency, what do you think about? What do you think about when you think about student agency? And I am going to open up the chat here because I'm hoping you will flood the chat. So go for it. Ownership, choice.
Being your own advocate.
Yep. Accountability, goal setting, students taking initiative, active engagement, student voice, advocating, standing up for themselves, advocacy, students caring about what they're doing, feeling of competence, efficacy, advocacy, ownership, student-centered classrooms.
Love that. Yeah.
Sense of community, self-direction, ownership. Awesome. So these are all aspects of agency, and the thing that I find so interesting, which we'll continuously talk about in the next hour, is our students with diverse needs are the students that need this agency the most, and yet it's hardest to set up situations for them to do this. So I really do hope that you leave here today with some new ideas. I love this picture because, well, we can talk about why. Agency. By the way, Beth, can you see the tops of my slides?
Student agency.
Okay, good.
I mean, yeah, it looks great.
Because they're blocked by the images for me.
Oh, okay.
So we have a sense of agency when we feel in control of things that happen around us, and when we feel that we can influence events. This is an important sense for learners to develop. And there's a book called How to Personalize Learning by Barbara Bray and Kathleen McClaskey, and it's a good book, and that quote's from there. And when we all want agency. As adults, we want agency. And I think that that's the important thing to remember, is that when we are out of control as adults, and we don't feel that we can affect our environment and our circumstances, it breeds an incredible amount of anxiety for some people. It breeds dependence. So it's the same thing for kids, and we know that. So, and this picture made me smile because I feel like anybody that has had little kids went through that period where they had to decide whether to do Velcro or shoelaces, right? So, and it makes me think about, what were your goals? What were our goals? Were our goals to give kids agency in that moment? And in that, and or was our goal to get out of the house quickly, right, without complication? And how did we meet those goals, right? So some of us handed off the Velcro, and it's student dependent, right? It's kid dependent. For some kids, we gave them Velcro. For other kids, we taught them how to tie their shoes at different developmental ages. So I just, and there's that moment when your kid actually ties their shoe and they're feeling like, so powerful. I like this image. There's a lot of vocabulary here, and it's vocabulary that you can take also when you speak to your students about student agency, and when you speak to colleagues about student agency, and when you think about it. And so, the first is we help kids to set advantageous goals for themselves. And to do that, they need awareness, forethought, intentionality, and planful competence. Okay, so we want them to be able to set goals for themselves. We want them to be able to initiate action to pursue those goals. And then that means that they're going to be using choice. They're going to be using their voice. They will have free will, freedom, autonomy, all these beautiful words that we want for our kids. Self-influence, self-initiation, which is so hard particularly with struggling learners. And I'm going to keep coming back to that. Sometimes because of the instruction that we feel our learners need, which is often direct instruction and an incredible amount of adult support, either because of time or organization or environment, we can't arrange things in order for them to be autonomous or independent, right? Or to be feeling some of these different states. We want to help them reflect on their performance, reflect on their situation, reflect on their work, reflect on their relationships, their interactions, and then make revisions based on their reflections, right? So that includes self-reflectiveness. They need to learn how to self-assess, use self-control, use self-discipline, persistence and grit, and be conscientious. And then last but not least, right, we want them to internalize the feeling that they can make things happen for themselves. That's what we call self-efficacy. There's this guy, Albert Bandura, who started the concept, or is like the father of the concept of efficacy, collective efficacy too. And you may have heard that as a teacher, working with your school teams. But we want them to feel efficacious in terms of manipulating their environment, getting what they need, and achieving their goals. Okay. And so our instruction, right? We want to provide instruction that allows them to grow in their understanding of themselves as a learner, right? To take on challenges and express preferences and act on those preferences. We want to support them in their ability to assess the learning environment, or any environment, right? But for us, it's school. That includes, oftentimes we teach young readers to pick up a book and use, I think it's like the 5-finger rule, and if there's 5 words they don't know, they're going to return the book and pick another one. It's the same thing. That's a microcosm of that. So we want them to be able to assess either work that they're getting and figure out what they need to complete the work. They want to be able to assess the environment that they're entering and what works for them, what kind of an work environment works for them. Do they listen to music? Do they not listen to music? Do they need silence? Do they need a timer? Those sorts of things. And then speak up, right? This is what I need. This is what I want. This is what I need. So what I would love now is I have a poll for you. I have a couple polls since it gets a little boring sitting there for an hour, and I love to get your feedback here. I would love for you, there's 2 questions on this poll, And the first one from our teacher experts, what I'd like to know is you're going to choose the 5 strategies from a list of 10 that you use most in your physical classroom. There's 2 separate parts to the poll. There's a virtual part and there's a in-classroom part. So I am going to launch this poll, and I would love if everybody would choose their 5. Are you guys seeing or getting the poll?
I don't see it.
I see it.
I see it.
I see
Okay,
it.
there was a delay.
I
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. Now we're cooking.
Can I just clarify, is this in non-pandemic times or?
This is in, yes, you can graft that on to non-pandemic times. I mean, hopefully a little of it's happening with your kids in school in the pandemic, but I know it's hard. Thanks, Brooke. All right, 69% have voted. Keep going. Let's go for 100. All right, we're slowing. We got 79% voted. So I'm going to, it's interesting. So the most popular strategy was posting with visuals, routines for transitions, right? Handing in work. So 75% of you use that to support some autonomy and agency. Folks are using visual timers for students to self-monitor. That's fabulous. Lots of folks are using student choice for seating, you know, T-chars, balance balls, all that sort of thing. What else? Visuals, anchor charts, right? Folks are doing that. Student choice of product was 44%, and student choice of learning topic was 37%. And controlled choice of mind maps and graphic organizers was only 22%. So that's kind of interesting. So here, I'm sharing the results with you. Can you see the results on the screen? Yeah? Okay.
Yes.
Great. Awesome.
Yeah.
So there's your winner. It is really interesting. And I know that this top one is only if you have native language speakers that are other than English in your classroom. All right, well, thank you. Now, I think I'm gonna have you do the other one. Well, no, let's do a little work together, talking, and then we will do the second poll.
Karen, I just had someone ask, is this webinar for all ages K through 12 or focused on younger students?
So I would say that there are pieces of this that will focus on younger students, and there are pieces of it that will also focus on 9 through 12. I think it's K through 8, you're safe with everything on here. And if you're a high school teacher, you're gonna have to sift in and out a little bit. But there will definitely be pieces of it that are relevant for high school.
And preschool too.
Preschool's hard. No, I can't say that I designed the webinar thinking a lot about preschool, but I think that there will be some elements that will be supportive.
She wrote, yes, she's in high school, so that's good.
Okay.
Thanks.
So the Harvard study that's referred to here is uploaded in the folder to which you will get a link after this. I uploaded about 6 different articles that were really interesting. And it's basically saying that, when we embark on school improvement, right, and we talk to people about how to improve their instruction and what goes on in classrooms, we talk a lot about reading skills and math skills, reasoning, academic knowledge, right? That's usually our big focus. And this study basically is pointing out that agency-related factors are equally important. And in our real lives, we know this, right? Because we know plenty of people that were not necessarily academically focused that are tremendously successful because they know how to advocate. They know how to make choices, right? They know what to do in certain circumstances that as needed. There's all sorts of other characteristics that lead to a person being successful. They have a growth mindset, all sorts of those non-academic characteristics are equally important, and this study shows that. And this was a quote, and again, this article is also in the folder. I'm going to read it to you. These capacities are crucial to success in post-secondary education, the workforce, and civil life. It's essentially what I was saying. They should be woven into the way all students are taught and never considered mere add-ons. Personalized learning, which places greater emphasis on student decision-making and agency, should offer many ways to support these abilities in an environment of high expectations and respect for all. And just taking that back to our struggling learners and our diverse learners, right? It is hardest to provide these opportunities for them because it requires so much planfulness and a considerable amount of scaffolding, which takes time. So, which is why we're here today. Okay, into the meat of things. The first strategy or concept that I want to really emphasize here is gradual release of responsibility. And I would bet that 80% of you on today know what this is, or probably 95%. But I want to review it a little bit. I love this visual. I've been using this visual for years, and I just think it's really helpful. So you can see, right, that the trend goes down. That trend line speaks to the teacher level of support. And on the bottom, you see the sort of path of instruction. I do, you watch. I do, you help me. You do, I help you. You do, I watch. And we have used this over and over and over again as teachers. But I love the way that this model, above the bar, right, talks about the amount of control that the student has, right? So the student starts off with very little control. And as we lower our support, we hand over more and more control to the student. And then, obviously at the top, it's what we do, right? We demonstrate, we share demonstration, we do guided practice, we do independent practice. One piece to this that I want to emphasize is that when you challenge a student to go it on their own, right, as you withdraw your support, you will have the most success if you lower the cognitive demand at first. Right? So when we ask kids, I think about it sometimes with like complex text. You may use a piece of complex text, and this is, for high school, for any grade level, but I've done it most in high school, right? You might take a really complex text, something from the Common Core samples, and you're going to scaffold that heavily and work that through with them. But then if you then turn around and ask students to consume or utilize text on their own, right, you're going to lower at first the level of that text complexity and build them back up. this is just an example, a math example, just to make sure we're all on the same page, right? We've all done this, and maybe not with a word problem, with 1,000 things. You model, you do your think aloud, you model again, and they participate, or the student or the group or whoever's sitting in front of you, right? While you're doing it, you create an anchor chart, which is basically, for those of you that aren't familiar with this phrase, because for a long time I wasn't, it's basically like, it's the model of what you're going to do. You create it together, okay? And it's a resource for kids then when they need to go it alone. Then your next step is you observe a student or students solving a new problem, okay? And you're going to prompt them and coach them. And then step 4 is you're going to have them solve it alone, but you're probably going to simplify the problem a little bit, okay? And encourage them to use the cues from what you've built. And then the last step is you're having them reflect, right, on their effectiveness. So am I going too fast, or are you guys okay? Thumbs up? Okay, awesome. Another piece of this, right, is the collaborative aspect. Another way that we do this gradual release is that we have kids work together to support each other. So this visual, I think, just illustrates that really nicely. You have your target instruction, you have your guided instruction, and then it turns into not the student does it alone, but we do it, like the group does it together in a collaborative learning environment. And then the student is asked to do something independently, right? So first and I'm sure you all do this all the time. You have a group of students work together, an integrated group of students, a diverse group of students, so that the struggling students or the diverse student, right, receives support from maybe students that may be stronger in that area. And, just to emphasize this, and this is sometimes we fall down on the job because we ran out of time, we ran out of planning, we have a behavior problem, we're schlepped out of the classroom. It's 1,000 things. But ideally, you're going to be purposeful, and you're going to consider the proficiency levels of the participants, the personalities, the structure, and you're going to provide plenty of structure. And this is just an example for pairs, right? So we go from individual and then pairs, which is a nice supportive and simple way to support, to groups. Groups can get harder. They're more complicated. So to start with pairs, to train kids in pairs is ideal. And then this is your typical, think, pair, share with rounds. So the kids are alone, and then they have the support of a pair. And then after that support, they transition to a foursome, basically, or sharing with the whole class. And this is also pairing oriented. These directions here are directions for what I love this program. It's called 6-Minute Solutions, and it is a fluency program. And it takes the fluency practice and scripts it so that your whole class is paired up and can practice fluency together. And it teaches the kids to support each other in their fluency practice. But what I wanted to emphasize here is this is very prescriptive. The more prescriptive we can be when we have our students working in pairs and working in teams, the more successful and the more masterful they will feel. And you can check out 6-Minute Solutions for fluency. So I think I wasn't so clear. So I went to the individual, the pair, and now we're thinking about groups. And again, it's the same thing. We're thinking about assigning roles with intention and thinking about the different proficiency levels in those groups and assigning roles accordingly. And so you can see in this little wheel, right, there's a variety of roles there. It's just an example. So you're gonna think about who's in that group and who's gonna be the best. You're not gonna give the student who's writing resistant or has fine motor issues the job of writer, right? But you may give that student the supply specialist job. It's sort of the oldest thing in the book, right? These are basic things that when we went to school for this and we first started teaching, that, we were taught and thought about. And I wanted to just give a shout out to the fishbowl, because the fishbowl allows everyone to participate when you have an active outside circle. And it's a really strong tool for giving kids a sense of engagement and investment in the lesson without putting them on the spot. Any questions?
I'm not seeing any.
Okay. We are going to flood the chat again. Also because I really like this image that I came up with. What are some of the things that we think about when we think about groupings and putting our diverse students working in inclusive groupings? What are the things that you think about when you do this?
Tolerance levels, someone wrote.
Tolerance levels. I want to go back to that.
Yeah, behaviors.
Dominance, student buy-in, social dynamics, personalities.
Remote versus in person.
The tolerance levels, I think that's an interesting thing because, right, if a kid is intolerant of working in a group or has social anxiety, then it's no longer a supportive mechanism for that student, right?
Right. And someone wrote self-confidence, self-esteem. Yeah.
Great. Great. Thank you. I'm just looking on here to see if there's anything that I want to address. No, you guys are great. Thank you. So going back to this idea, we have to think about behaviors, we have to think about strengths and weaknesses. Across the board, though, again, just to reiterate that, the more structure that you can supply, the better. And this is just an example of instruction, right? So how to partner, right? How to be in a group, how to listen, and how these pieces need to be explicitly addressed, explicitly taught, modeled, practiced intentionally and reflectively, and then posted, right? So that it's like, it's like posting your norms so that anytime you're giving instruction, you can actually reference up there, what they're familiar with. And, this is how we do this. And these are for you because they'll be in the slides, but these are just some templates that you can use. If this is scaffolding, your basic, I just think this stuff is really handy in your classroom. So I wanted to give it to you. There's not much to say here, but you get the picture. It's modeling for them. It's giving them the language. And if you give it to them, they can use it and they feel good and they do it right. And they succeed. And one last plug, and I'm constantly plugging this, and it is, if you Google reciprocal teaching, you will come up with 15 sites. It is one of the only free, research-supported strategies to improve reading comprehension that exists. Okay, so I have revamped entire RTI systems 6 through 12 using reciprocal teaching as an intervention. And the side effect of it is, right, kids are teaching themselves. The students become an independent, high-functioning group. With your protocols and your modeling, it takes extensive modeling and intensive instruction around each strategy. But if you if you front load and you put in the work at the beginning, it's an amazingly effective strategy. And it works really well for diverse learners because they're supported by their peers. There can be oral reading. It just teaches them. It's great. And I could do a whole workshop just on that. So I encourage you to check that out, especially, I mean, obviously, I'm not think this is not happening in second grade. I'm thinking this is probably fourth grade and above. Fourth grade, a lot of scaffolding. And for the high school teachers out there, don't make the mistake of assuming they can do this at all, because it's not true. And you will wind up walking away frustrated because you'll be like, they stunk, they hated it, it was horrible, nothing good happened. And I'll bet it's because the front loading wasn't there. So that's my advice on that, because I've been there. All right, keeping going. Oof, goes fast. Scaffolding. I just like this, right? I like this image because it truly, like, we have great heights being achieved, and then there's support at every step. I just liked the visual. And I liked this visual. It just includes all of the different ways that we all scaffold, right? And I've included in diverse learners here, obviously I've included ELL learners with our special education students and our others 504s and our unlabeled diverse students. And this is some of what we talked about earlier in the poll. And we're going to talk about some of this here. So these are some simple scaffolds, and that's it. You know, this is how a kindergarten becomes competent and feels efficacy, right? We never give a kindergartner a piece of paper, right? Oh, write a sentence. That's not what happens, right? We put out blanks for that kindergartner. We sometimes write the letters in highlighter. You know, we'll take dictation, write the letters in highlighter, have the student go over the letters with a pencil. We might do dotted lines. We might make boxes for the sounds, right? And in this situation, we're using sentence strips, filling in sentences. And then it gets increasingly complex. So you're going to start with, one words, and then you're going to start with sentence frames and paragraph frames. And you're going to, this goes into compare and contrast, and you're going to scaffold the comparative language for them. You're going to scaffold the transitions for them at the beginning, and then slowly they will be able to leverage that language. You're going to provide, if you see in the lower left corner, word banks, eventually maybe and you can see that there, despite the fact, even though, however, in contrast, nevertheless, like, we're giving them that language. That's all a scaffold. And now we have a more complex organizer for the students, right? And, giving students choice about what kind of organizer they feel they can meet the demand for is a really good idea, right? You may have students that are ready for this organizer, but then have other students that need the previous organizer. And you can let them choose what they feel they're ready for. For those of you that didn't know what what did I say? Anchor chart was. Sorry, I think that maybe, especially high school, you may not know what an anchor chart is, and maybe middle school. This is just an example of an anchor chart, right? This is work that the group had done together. They posted it, and you're taking these different pieces of the sentence and putting them together to create sentences. And it's color coded, right? And we never really, I don't know about you, but I don't often think about those things, and they're really effective. So it's all in the details. This is an example of using visuals to scaffold. And this is an example of work that we did with a 6 through 12 audience of teachers that were teaching ELL students, right? So you have the text on the left, but then with the text for your language, either your language impaired or your English as a second language speakers, right? We have these visuals there to support their comprehension. Any questions, Beth? How we doing?
No, we're looking great.
All right. Y'all just jump in. And then we've been using manipulatives. One thing I wanted to point out is that clip art is not as effective as realistic visuals. And so we encourage folks to not use clip art, especially for English language learners, right? And the word for that is realia. So we talk about graphic organizers. This is a great, and I wanted to plug for learning situations where your students with learning disabilities or ELL students, where instead of having where they're able to do divergent work, right? So no one is pursuing an answer here, right? We've put the learning in their lap. It is the student's job, right? And all they have to do is rely on themselves, what they see, what they think, and what they wonder about. And I think that this is a really nice opportunity, and it's a nice phrase and a nice strategy to use with particularly with your diverse learners, with all learners. So you give them a provocative photo and that leads into the learning, and have them have at it. And they can do it in groups, they can do it individually. Excuse me. This particular photo, for those of you that are K through, I would say 6 to 8, is part of an initiative. It was put out by Time Magazine. It was published about what the world eats. And families were asked to take a photo with all of the food that they eat in a week. And the photos are from, there's like 30 different countries, and and they did sort of an analysis of it. So I just think it's a really cool opportunity, and kids, every time I use that, kids are intrigued like crazy. This is just mind mapping. And I was surprised to see that not a lot of choice for mind maps are provided. And graphic organizers are one thing, but the difference between a mind map and a graphic organizer is that a mind map forces you into thinking in the particular way that's expected, right? So you can see, let's say, where we have the double bubble map, that a student, if they're using it, if you model it, then they're already channeled into making comparisons. And you can actually, what I use a lot with mind mapping is, you can have students add descriptive words along the lines. So if we think, just thinking about the bubble, let's take the simple bubble map for a second. If you put a concept in there, let's say you're doing a character study, and the study is about To Kill a Mockingbird. And if you stick Scout in the middle of the bubble map, and then you put different variables around the outside. So if you, on the outside, you put Boo Radley, and along the line, students should be encouraged to write about the relationship. So Scout, and then you might say, the student might say, fears Boo Radley. And if you put her father in another bubble, use those lines to help the students make the relationships and do the cognitive work. And that's what's so useful about in mind mapping. And there's a lot of online tools that will help you do that. We used to have inspiration software. I don't know if it exists anymore. I don't think it does. But this coggle that I've written at the bottom is a piece of online software that will allow you to do this. Okay.
Is the Venn diagram considered mind mapping? Very organized.
Yes. A Venn diagram, sort of.
sort of.
Probably
And
less so because you don't have the space for the analysis, right? So a bubble map will give you those lines to talk about the relationships, whereas a Venn diagram, you're overlapping those circles and you can see the commonalities. And I think it's a good basic tool. I think that a Venn diagram is a great place to start, like K through 5, and then starting in about like, you know, 4th grade, you can move them into concept mapping and mind mapping, and it'll facilitate better, deeper thinking.
she asked another good question, which I'm impressed with too. I didn't realize, she said there are more maps than she knew of. Myself too. I didn't realize there were so many. Did you just find these on a Google search, or any recommendations on where to find? Are there even more than this? And these are the ones you chose, or?
This was, I mean, because I needed a quick shot, you know, for the presentation, this was from Google and I snapped a photo. But if you want to email me, or actually when we get off, I will try to find some and upload them into the folder that you are getting a link to.
Great.
Okay. And Beth will remind me I said that.
Yes, I'm just putting this in the notes too. Yeah.
I'm typing. I heard you typing.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Accessibility. We're going to talk about some online stuff here, but I am hoping that many of you have heard of universal design for learning. And there is your best resource for learning about how to make things accessible. This particular slide lists a lot of ways to make your classroom accessible. And I think that they're pretty obvious, and I think that we all would like to implement all of these things. And if we're lucky, we can. And maybe with all of the CARES money that comes next year, we can buy tea chairs and make cozy sitting areas and have different seating options and buy headphones. So, but these are some different ways that are really important to get rid of needless learning barriers that make kids unable to do what they need to do and dwarf their sense of agency. And these are some very basic practices, again. And this is from the UDL guidelines. So the top one, you know, speaks to all of those visual scaffolds, charts, calendars, schedules, using visual timers, cues. We know about routines, preparation for changes in activity schedules. It's like the 5-minute warning. Okay. And then options, right? For getting rid of background noise, visual stimulation, helping. It's basically you're giving these choices to kids and making them aware of these choices as a way for them to get to know their own learning preferences.
Karen, somebody has asked, how is this all different from understanding by design?
It's not. This is understanding by design. This is directly from understanding by design.
Okay.
Because when we take care of these barriers and when we alert kids to the learning environment and the variables that they have control over, we're giving them agency because we're teaching them to make choices about what works best for them. Okay, so we're going to get techie now. These are some tech tools that help to give kids options and help you to reach a variety of learners. So I am sure that many of you have created videos this year. Screencastify and Loom. Folks like Loom better I think the videos can be longer and it's more comprehensive, but what I gather is that Screencastify may be a little easier. Obviously we can record sessions through Zoom. And I don't know if you have heard of Vocaroo. It's a super duper easy. You just press a button, you speak into it, and then you can upload that recording. So a student who doesn't like to write, right? If they know that they can choose to use Vocaroo, they might respond to a prompt orally. Bam, they just upload it to Seesaw, upload it to Google Classroom, whatever they need. It's a really nice option.
Somebody mentioned that they really love it, but another person mentioned they are not allowed to use it because of privacy agreements. So it might depend on each school.
I didn't check these with the New Hampshire approved list. I should have. So don't use anything without checking. I haven't used Cami. People love Cami. I use Jamboard all the time now. Talk about like agency. If you are online and you give them a link, if you're working with 10 kids and you're online and you put a link in the chat to a Jamboard, the kids can participate like crazy, and it's colorful and fun and simple, and it really gives a sense of participation and belonging and ability to contribute, which I appreciate. And it's colorful and cool. Okay, so Microsoft's Immersive Reader will change text to speech. Google's Read Aloud will change text to speech rather. Amara is another source for closed captioning for free. And then if you do slides in Google Slides, then you can click closed captioning and the words will come as you speak them beneath the text, which is really lovely. And super helpful. So obviously, right, behooves all of us to teach the students that they have these options when they're working on their own. I was working with a couple of teachers, second grade teachers, and her name is Emily, and she was telling me how thrilled she left last Friday. She left school so happy because she had given the students a prompt to respond to, and she taught them how to dictate their responses into Google. And the amount that they wrote was 5 times as much as they would typically write. I mean, what a freeing thing for either a super young student, for, those kindergartners who don't have the endurance or the fine muscle tone to do what they need to express themselves. My own high school student, when he was in high school, he wrote all his papers by dictating them first and then would go back in, and he's a beautiful writer, would go back in and edit them. So, and it's free and so easy. And I'm not sure that most of us are using this. So it really gives a sense of independence. The other thing is that you can translate any document, right? Students can take text and translate it for themselves into their language of choice.
So amazing.
It is amazing. Whoops. And this goes backwards a little bit. This Book Creator, I don't know if you've used it, but folks have said that it's very empowering for students, and it's really easy to use and free. So I would suggest you explore that. Bookshare. So students can get books read aloud to them. It's free to schools and to individuals with print-based disabilities. So if you haven't already explored that to give your students what they need, that's there for you. You can set up your schools or classrooms texts. And I wanted to plug Common Lit. And this is only for, I would say, grades 4 through 12. But what I love about Common Lit is that you can choose. Do you see where I've circled there? A student can choose to have the text read aloud. A student can also choose to have the text translated. So if I highlight anything in there, I can have the text read to me in my native language. It's to me, it feels like a minor miracle. And you can make the font size bigger. There's all sorts of things that students can do to make this work for them that they have control over. Okay, this is your resources for language learners, right? So language doesn't have to be a barrier. And I'm sure you've heard of some of these: Talking Points, Remind. Those are apps on your phone that you can use to communicate with students and parents. You can just use them in English, but all of it can be translated. You have Language Bank and Language Line, which are face-to-face phone services. And I wanted to let you know that Microsoft 365 closed captioning can translate into foreign language. Okay, so yeah.
I'm so sorry.
No.
We're done. I was just going to reiterate the slides. These will all be sent to you tomorrow. So don't worry. You don't have to copy down what's in the slides. You can put your notes along with the page number down on your own notes at home. But this will all be sent to you along with your professional development certificate and any other resources Karen has mentioned today. So don't fret.
I have a hard time holding back when I have these opportunities. I just can't help but want to give you as much to use as possible. So I hope that it's okay. We're going to talk a little bit about choice here. Choice is fairly self-evident in this. I think that that's the thing, one of the things we understand best. I would encourage you to provide managed choice, right? Kids don't do well with the blank page. Teachers also need to control the choice, elements of choice for their own sanity. And below, I just listed some of the different ways to provide choice, right? So you can give students different tiers of challenge. You can have them choose between different reinforcers. You can, obviously give them choice in content or the context for practicing or learning specific target skills. The tools that they're going to use. And we've all learned a lot about that this year online, giving students choice about how they want to express themselves or make products. Little things, and this is, again, I never think about these things, but like the color, design, graphics, layouts, that's easy stuff to be flexible with. So you can create a sense of power and autonomy and agency just with that. Like if you don't feel like you're ready to give choice in content or audience in that moment, like that's the easy stuff. It's the low-hanging fruit. Sequence, timing of completion. Again, we've experimented with that this year because we've had to, as our kids have been at home. And I'm hoping we've learned what our limits are and our boundaries around that and expanded those boundaries. And then we have, product, learning partners, and audience are all pieces of choice. I'm not going to stay on here because we have only a limited amount of time, but this is in the slide, and this is a series of questions that you can ask yourself when you're planning instruction about what you can provide choice. And then on the right-hand side, these are prompts for you to use with students when you're talking to them about them making their own choices. And this is from, I stole this somewhere from the UDL site. And I really like those prompts. Like, what does success look like for you? What choices will help you get there? What barriers do you anticipate trying to reach the goal? I mean, imagine if we could have these conversations with our struggling learners.
Struggling learners, this could be used with adults too at any time. These are great.
Well, we all know that the practices that we're talking about here are best teaching practices across the board. So,
Yeah.
This is a choice board. You've all probably used choice boards this year. I stole this from Caitlin Tucker. She's a online learning guru, and I just snapped it off of her website. But she does a good job with online choice boards and making them accessible. So.
And her name is Caitlin Tucker.
Caitlin, not Caitlin. It's Caitlin Tucker. She's a smart lady.
Caitlin Tucker, Catlan Tucker.
Yes.
I'm just putting this in the chat so people can write it down.
Thanks, Beth. And you know these things. This is just a sweet little wordle I made to talk about the different ways that we give them product choice. And then we have audience choice. And now our audience is that much wider because we have the whole world basically through Zoom. Oh good. We're actually not going to be that late. All right. But this is important. So I know that we're going to go 5 minutes over and that's it. But I really want to express this to you. The slides that I'm about to show you are from Bill Wilmot from UDL, from CAST. And I loved this. When we think about giving choice, one of the most important things we have to do is for ourselves to figure out what exactly is the learning target. So the learning target is the only thing that can't move. But if we can hone in on the learning target and then provide choice around it, our students will be better off. So this is the example that I'm going to share with you. If students get an assignment to write an essay on the life cycle of butterflies, there's two targets here. Do we want them to know about the life cycle of butterflies and show that learning? Or do we want them to know how to write an essay and show that learning? So if it's just a question of the content of the life cycle of butterflies in a science class, we can provide a lot of choice about who they work with, how they get their resources, what their product will be, who they present their product to, when they do the work, right? Good. The rubric's going to talk about, our scoring rubric, right, is going to talk about the butterfly, what happened. These are the things that we're going to understand, that we're going to make sure that the student needs to convey. Now, if the goal was to write the essay, it's an entirely different thing. Then you have the freedom to tell them, these are your outcomes. These are your targets. You do what you need to do. We don't have product choice then. The product is an essay, right? But then we have context or content choice. Okay. So it's a pretty easy concept, but I wanted to get it out there because it's really important. Let me just go back for a second while I'm talking about this so you don't get distracted. It's really important. It's one of the fundamental things about giving choice that we sometimes get confused around. And this has to do with goal setting. How we want to help kids articulate their individual goals or team goals. We can post those goals. We can make it a part of our classroom. I love when kids are asked to use charts right? To either chart their collective goals, maybe their full class goals, maybe their small group goals, maybe their individual goals. And we want to help them set personal goals and talk with them about realistic goals, realistic but optimistic, right? That's what we talk about when we talk about IEP goals, right? Realistic but optimistic. Always discuss, don't just post your learning targets, discuss the learning targets. And you can even work with the kids to articulate the learning targets. And always, we always post student work. We all know about that, we're teachers. Okay, last bit. The monitoring piece. We need to help kids monitor themselves. And I think that's something that flies by the wayside when we're under stress, right? So we want to help them learn how to ask themselves questions, how to ask each other questions, how to monitor each other in peers, taking self-assessment surveys, obviously student-friendly, student-facing rubrics, actually setting goals, so for instance, like fluency goals. I used to do a lot of work with K-5 literacy, and it was amazing the growth that we saw when simple, you had kids read and reread passages, chart their growth and their reading rate. And it was like growth through the roof. And what's his name? He's not the only one, but that's frustrating. I can't remember his name, but Marzano is one of those people that has done a lot of research around self-monitoring and how that alone adds to student achievement, right? So identifying the target and having students self-monitor, that alone adds to student achievement. And these are some different ways. So at the top, it just talks about helping kids to develop a sense of efficacy and perseverance, problem solving, right? So don't come to the teacher right away. Who's your peer partner? Consult a peer. Take a break. Walk away from it. Go back to it. Chunk out your work. Set short-term goals. Okay? Use a checklist. Check, got that done. Check, that got that done. Right? Social stories. Don't know if you know what that is. If you want to know what that is, I will tell you it's one of my favorite things, and I have a great story that goes along with that. Social stories are beautiful. Very quickly, you sit with a student, you create a narrative with that student of what success looks like in a given scenario for that student. Okay, that's the foundation of a social story. And then for self-monitoring, right? Portfolios are the best, self-reflective portfolios, charts, graphs, journals, rubrics, self-questioning, peer review. And this is, I love this, different ways at the end of a lesson for students to indicate to themselves, to make a judgment about how effective their learning was in that lesson. Obviously exit tickets, and there are some prompts for exit tickets that I like to use. I have teachers that I've met that have kids hand in their work in different color bins according to how well that student judges how well they understood and the work that they did, right? Their mastery level. It's the same with the stoplight. This woman, Sarah Westerveld on Teaching Channel, she's like the queen. She has a system where kids, she's a high school teacher, the kids take stickies and they put stickies up on stoplights on a red, yellow, green to indicate with a question how well they understood the learning from the day. So those are just some, and lastly, listen, I haven't used any of these, but I got them from one of the articles that I uploaded to the folder. These are all tools that I have never heard of that all do the same thing. They help students self-regulate on the internet. Okay, so this is here for you, and I encourage you to check them out. I got my own children who are now 19 years old one of them in particular could have used this, because like stuff took him hours because he was in 1,000 different places. So this is a gift to you, that list.
And someone mentioned Relay Classroom as well, could be added to that.
Relay Classroom. Okay, Beth, you'll write that in the chat.
Yes, someone put it in for everybody. Yep.
Oh, thank you. And this is, and I'm admitting I haven't used this, but this was introduced to me by a woman named Carolyn Berenson, who does work for us. She's done webinars for us, and she's a learning disabilities specialist. Her focus is technology with learning disability students. And she talked about how this iConnect can be personalized to help students pursue their self-defined goals, right? So as a special education teacher or a parent or an ELL teacher, you might sit down with that student and define how this tool could help the student meet their personal goals. Okay. Has anyone, if you've used it, certainly write into the chat. Carolyn really likes it. This is the last slide. And this is a resource for you. It comes from the link at the bottom. It's Students at the Center Hub. And there's 2 of these rubrics, 3 through 5, and then I think it's a 6 through 8, and there's a 9 through 12. And it's just some language that you can start to use either with students if they're old enough to use a rubric like this, or you could use the rubric to create a simpler student-facing rubric if you really wanted to hone in on the agency as a goal for a particular student or group of students. And this will be in the folder also. Okay, that's it. So can we, I'm going to stay on for a while now if you'd like to, and I can chat and answer any questions. I do want you to know that we have a YouTube channel, and there's tons of stuff on our YouTube channel. This particular recording will be housed on our playlist under School Improvement. The School Improvement playlist does not exist in this moment. It will exist when this is posted tomorrow, because this is the first of several of these that we will probably be opening up to everybody in the state, thanks to the DOE. So certainly go to our YouTube channel. There must be over 100 videos posted there.
Pretty much any topic. And I'd love to remind them as well that we're going to send out a survey, and it takes a minute to fill out. It's 3 questions, but if anyone has any suggestions of other webinar topics, things that would be really helpful to you, please send them in, because if it's going to be helpful to you, I'm sure it would be helpful to others as well. And we'd love to do our best to support you all.
And I want to invite you, you are more than welcome to email me and ask me about any of the resources that I've included here. We can talk on the phone. I love to talk about this stuff. And you can email, whatever. We are very accessible here at Demonstrated Success. So thank you. And we'll stay for a bit, and you can unmute and chat as much as you want, or feel free to go forth in this lovely snowy day. I hope you all get outside.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you all, and don't hesitate, as she said, to reach out even down the road when you think of something. Karen will be available. So stay well.